production of Papillon, and there were plenty, they were not attributable to him, as long as he was on the picture. The shooting in Spain went well and quickly enough. This was the part of the film that was supposed to take place in France. The prisoners bound for the penal colony herded like animals through the streets by soldiers and into a dusty, sun-baked prison yard. There they're made to strip and listen as the warden of the prison informs them that few of them will live out their prison terms, and that none will return home again. That for France they no longer exist. It is a cruel speech, certainly, but important, and even necessary in that it perfectly sets the tone of the film, preparing the audience for the saga of inhumanity that is to follow. In the picture it is delivered by the man who wrote it, Dalton Trumbo. Franklin Schaffner, who chose him for the part, insists that there is no special story here, and that there was certainly no irony intended. The warden played by a jailbird. When he says that he interviewed a couple of English actors for the part, but that one morning he awakened, sat up in bed, and said to himself that it had to be Trumbo. Well, what he is telling us, I think, is that he had by then suddenly come to recognize the intensely theatrical quality of the man. The sense of drama that Trumbo projects almost casually, but never certainly unconsciously. Dalton Trumbo is a natural actor. It was when the production moved to Jamaica, however, that problems on Papillon mounted. Trouble came, and financial disaster struck. There were difficulties that may seem only petty in retrospect, but at the time seemed almost insurmountable. Dustin Hoffman, for example, had been led to understand that he and Steve McQueen were not only to be given equal billing, but were to be paid the same for their work in Papillon. In fact, Hoffman was getting $1.25 million to Queen's $2 million. When he discovered that, he was for some days afterward aggrieved, indignant, and angry. Finally, he settled back down to work. The ganji was, as always, plentiful there in Jamaica, and it was readily available to the company. Some were not content to smoke the stuff, however. They boiled a batch of it up and mixed it secretly into the drinks at a party. Everybody got high, but a few got sick as well. Among them Franklin Schaffner, and so a day of shooting was lost. Other days were lost more prosaically to the weather, and there was a period of about 3 weeks when the money ran out and nobody got paid. It looked then as though the production would shut down altogether. There was trouble with the local population. One morning on the way to the location, Dustin Hoffman's driver hit a pedestrian and caused serious injury. Because of that, not the driver, but Dustin Hoffman received threats against his life. Threats only, no attempts. Larceny, however, was something else again. They not only attempted there, but succeeded on the grand scale. Theft and pilferage were constantly a problem. But when the production ended, and before properties could be packed and shipped, the island people began raiding methodically and simply stripped the set. Costumes went, 600 pairs of shoes were stolen from wardrobe, machinery, even handy pieces of lumber, in all a $30,000 loss. But now I'm getting ahead of my story because just before shooting on Papillon was completed, the production suffered its most serious setback. Dalton Trumbo was forced to leave the company before the script was quite completed. What happened was this. Weeks before, just prior to leaving for Spain, he had taken a medical examination for another insurance policy. They heard nothing about it. The examining physician had done his job all right. He had called attention in his report to a worrisome shadow in the area of Trumbo's left lung. But the insurance agent had simply sat on the report, out of either ignorance or misdirected consideration. At last, however, he passed it on to Trumbo's wife, Cleo. She telephoned him immediately in Jamaica. "Sure, I remember that call. It was a Sunday. We weren't shooting. There was a meeting right there in the Bay Rock Hotel, where we were staying. Dalton and myself and McQueen and Hoffman were all present, and Dalton was called out of the room to take this call from his wife. He was told it was important. Well, he came back and didn't say anything. Finally, McQueen and Hoffman left, and Dalton stayed and told me what he'd just heard. It was very unsettling.